So, Bitcoin, hey? Here we are, March of 2026, and our good old friend Bitcoin has dropped a rather impressive 40% per coin in value. Now, my first thought was, well, that surely can't be good. But I have been reassured by all my Bitcoin bros that, hey, this is what happens. Oh, hold on. We Bitcoin! They said, you can't have paper hands in this game. So, naturally, the first thing I did after that inspiring chat was to Google, what are paper hands? The magical Google person told me that paper hands is a term given to investors that sell at the first sign of volatility. So basically, it's don't be a wimp translated into trading lingo. Now, paper hands I may have, but having non-paper hands doth butter no parsnips if in the end I still lose money. Bitcoin's ups and downs are starting to make me feel a little bit on edge, to be honest, if not a tad unwell. Sort of like being on a ship riding huge waves, but the added kicker that every time I run outside to puke, I have to also chuck my wallet overboard. With that said, Bitcoin does seem to be a rather big deal, so I told myself, Rich, don't panic. I cancelled the cashing out of my $55 in Bitcoin and gave myself time to find out what exactly is Bitcoin. Now, it is called cryptocurrency, but putting a cat in the oven doesn't make it a biscuit. And so the next obvious question was, can us everyday Joes buy everyday goods with Bitcoin? And the answer is no, not really. So let me explain. Out of all the purchasing transactions made in the world, Bitcoin makes up less than 1% of them. Hold on, stop. That pie chart is just so boring. Give me a sec. There we go. Whilst Bitcoin ownership has grown to around 7% globally, this does still mean that only 14% of people holding Bitcoin are using it to actually buy anything. So, why? Well, the first obvious answer is that very few companies in the world actually accept it as payment. Around 0.0004% to be precise. The problem with Bitcoin from a business owner's standpoint is its volatility. Now, imagine you own a baker's. You sell your bread and buns over the week. You accept payment with Bitcoin. But then the crypto market drops 40%, which is normally led by Bitcoin when this happens. This then also drops your turnover by 40%, which for most businesses would be devastating. Remember, not every business is a Microsoft. Small to medium-sized companies make up 90% of all the companies that exist, and they employ over 70% of the entire workforce. Now, let's say you're a customer buying the loaf of bread with your Bitcoin. The problem here is the transaction fees. Let's say you use your Visa to buy the bread. Hello. Visa will put a charge, let's say 2% on that transaction, so 2% of however much the bread costs. The business would have already either added this to the price or just swallowed the fee. Behind the scenes, Visa can do up to 65,000 transactions per second. But now let's say you use Bitcoin to purchase the bread. Bitcoin will charge a fee that changes depending on how many transactions it's trying to complete. This fee on average ranges from 50 cents to $5, something that's impossible to predict, and can go higher if the network is congested. And as Bitcoin can only do 3 to 7 transactions per second, that likelihood is quite high. So there's a high chance you'd end up paying more on fees than the item's worth. So just like sticking wheels on my Nan doesn't make her a bicycle, I just don't think the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, ticks the usable currency box in any practical case. And I'm sure my Bitcoin bros will agree, as 86% of them don't buy anything with it either. So the only other reason I see why you'd purchase Bitcoin is to keep it as a store of value. And then you may think, well, why should I do that? And with the real fear of this being the most anticlimactic end since Game of Thrones, I think the answer is you shouldn't. Because for us laymen's, and sorry, but most of us are, when we say a store of value, we just basically mean buying Bitcoin and then just hoping the price goes up. Because Bitcoin has become so accessible to buy online and it's so regularly spoken about in the media, I think it hides the fact that it's an incredibly complex and specialised investment. So just remember, especially when it comes to Bitcoin, that not everything that glitters is gold.